Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's every coach's frustration when you have to use challenges on out of bounds plays. I mean, it is what it is. But for teams to win 3 challenges in the first half, I don't know that I've ever seen that either. It's tough. But at the same time, for us, it started with our energy and on the defensive end of the floor. We were flat to start. We dug ourselves a hole. We didn't take care of the ball. We didn't handle their physicality. I mean, that's going to be the MO against us all year long. Teams are going to be physical. They're gonna push us. They're gonna.
The Indiana Fever endured their first gut-wrenching loss of the season in a thrilling 91-90 clash against the Atlanta Dream. But the narrow scoreline isn't the only headline. The spotlight quickly shifted to head coach Stephanie White's explosive reaction to what many are calling some of the most blatantly one-sided officiating seen in the WNBA this year. Known for her typically composed demeanor, White reached a breaking point as the referees appeared to tilt the scales in Atlanta's favor. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark delivered yet another electrifying performance, solidifying her reputation as one of the most extraordinary talents in the history of women's basketball.
To be some kind of better replay system or some kind of better review system where the referees can just go look at the screen whenever they want and get the call right, because she had to use both of her challenges in the first half on plays that seemed pretty obvious. And instead of the referees going to say, we're going to go look at this, Stephanie White had to use her challenge. She used them both. She was successful in both, but you only get 2. If you win the first one, then you get a second one. Otherwise, you get no more. So by the third quarter, when there were still more calls that she could have and should have probably questioned,
It's become an all-too-familiar story for Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Despite being the WNBA's most electrifying rookie, Clark has inexplicably found herself at the center of an alarming trend, absorbing a staggering 17% of all flagrant fouls called in the league this season. Yet instead of receiving the protection typically granted to marquee stars, officials have repeatedly turned a blind eye, letting defenders get away with physical, often borderline reckless, play. The data is undeniable. Clark is being singled out. And the officials' ongoing reluctance to enforce the rules fairly is quickly becoming a serious concern, one that risks undermining the league's integrity.
Aside, Brittany Griner was an absolute beast tonight, but I'm not sure there was a bigger beast in the arena than the officiating in this game, which was absolutely
Tuesday night's matchup against Atlanta was a textbook example of the problem. On 3 separate occasions, the referees made calls so questionable that coach Stephanie White was forced to challenge each one. This goes beyond routine human error. It's a stark indictment of the league's officiating standards. When a coach has to burn every challenge just to correct what should be obvious calls, it signals a deeper issue. Something is fundamentally flawed in how these games are being officiated.
I will stand by this. This is the worst referee game I've ever watched. And there were some horrendous calls both ways. Absolutely horrendous calls. The majority of horrendous calls went against the Fever.
The impact on Tuesday night's game was immediate and undeniable. Every missed or miscalled foul disrupted Indiana's rhythm and forced Caitlin Clark, already bearing a historic offensive workload, to battle through even more adversity. Rather than allowing her generational talent to shine, the officiating erected needless hurdles, robbing fans of the chance to witness the game's brightest star at her full potential. Clark's court vision was otherworldly. She threaded passes through defensive schemes as if she had access to a basketball cheat code the rest of us could only dream of. This isn't just a great player having a great game. What Clark is doing transcends traditional excellence. Just 3 days earlier, she notched a triple-double with 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists against Chicago. The consistency is staggering. She's averaging nearly 20 points and 8 assists per game, hitting over 34% from 3, and maintaining a jaw-dropping 90.6% from the free throw line. And yet, despite this unprecedented performance level, officials appear almost determined to make her journey more grueling than it needs to be.
Fouls. Oh my God, the refs in this game. They were just calling every ticky-tacky foul. The game stoppage was just overwhelming. And, there were a lot of fouls that actually did happen. There were a lot of fouls I saw that happened that weren't called. But the ticky-tack fouls, this was extra. Connor, Caitlin's boyfriend, even posted at the beginning of the game. He puts the referees on blast and he says, "Good to see the W refs in mid-season form." And of course, he deleted it a few minutes.
If you thought the officiating against Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever couldn't possibly get any worse this season, Tuesday night's game against the Atlanta Dream set a new low, a masterclass in how to undermine the integrity of professional basketball. Coach Stephanie White was forced to challenge 3 separate foul calls during crucial moments of the game, and won all 3. Let that sink in. The referees got 3 major calls wrong, each one going against the Fever. Coincidence? It's getting harder and harder to believe that. The first challenge came early in the second quarter when Clark was whistled for a phantom foul while cleanly contesting a dream shooter. Replay showed 0 contact, nothing but air. Yet somehow, these supposedly professional officials saw a foul that existed only in their imagination. White immediately challenged, and the call was overturned. 1 challenge down, 1 egregious error corrected. But the officiating fiasco didn't stop there. Midway through the third quarter, Aaliyah Boston was called for a blocking foul despite clearly establishing legal position well in advance, nearly 2 full seconds before contact. It was textbook defense, the kind every coach wants to show on tape. Still, the whistle blew against Boston. Again, Coach White challenged. Again, the call was overturned. That's 2 challenges. 2 blatant officiating errors. And the game wasn't over yet.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I just felt like they were trying to punish the Fever for the other night. You know, the referees were horrible tonight. Really poor officiating.
The most outrageous moment came with just under 4 minutes remaining, the Fever trailing by just 2. Caitlin Clark drove hard to the basket and was nearly clotheslined by a dream defender, a play that, in any fair league, would have been called a flagrant foul without hesitation. Instead, in a jaw-dropping twist, the officials called an offensive foul on Clark. The home crowd erupted in boos. Coach Stephanie White looked like she might spontaneously combust on the sideline. She used her final challenge, and, unsurprisingly to everyone except the officials, the call was overturned. This wasn't just a blown call. It was the latest example of a troubling, well-documented pattern. Clark has been targeted all season long. Reports show she has absorbed a staggering 17% of all flagrant fouls in the WNBA, nearly 1/5 of the league's total. 1 player. Let that sink in. If that doesn't scream systemic targeting, what does? The issue isn't just that Coach White had to challenge these calls. It's that she had to use all 3 of her challenges to correct obvious, game-changing mistakes that consistently went against her team. So what happens if there had been a 4th? Or a 5th? How many more advantages would Atlanta have been gifted if White hadn't been prepared to fight every step of the way?
My God, the officiating was on full display tonight. It was terrible. Ken Swift, all the national TV exposure, you would think they would want some good officiating to keep the people engaged. This is horrific. It was god-awful. Connor McCaffrey, Caitlin Clark's boyfriend. Good to see the W refs in mid-season form. He cremated them. Good for him. Jason Whitlock. This officiating crew is horrible. Dream, Fever. It was awful. It was terrible. Oh, the refs are hilarious.
With just 3.2 seconds left on the clock and the Fever trailing by 1, Coach Stephanie White made a decision that will be dissected and debated for weeks to come. Instead of designing the final play for Caitlin Clark, as virtually every basketball fan in America expected, White assigned her star guard to inbound the ball. This wasn't just a tactical move. It was a bold statement about trust, team unity, and the value of unpredictability. White knew Atlanta's defense would be laser-focused on denying Clark the ball, potentially double or even triple teaming her if she were the primary option. So she flipped the script. By having Clark inbound, White disrupted Atlanta's defensive expectations, forcing the Dream to scramble and rethink their coverage with just seconds to react. We know everyone expects the ball to be in Caitlin's hands for the last shot. White explained in a tense post-game press conference, her voice still tight with frustration over the loss and the officiating. But that's exactly why we had to try something different. They were ready to trap her hard. By letting her inbound, we created some confusion and got a decent look. The play nearly worked to perfection. And while the Fever came up just short, White's decision revealed something deeper. Her growing confidence in the full roster and a willingness to outthink opponents rather than lean solely on her superstar.
Going into that last possession, just what did you like about the play with Natasha and just her look?
Yeah, I mean, initially we're trying to get the ball to AB, but she was being chucked, so she couldn't get there. She had a good read. I mean, Tosh was open. We probably should have called timeout in that situation, but I felt like Tosh.
Every championship team must face adversity, and as heartbreaking as this loss was, it may provide exactly the kind of learning opportunity that fuels long-term success. Despite the defeat, there were several promising takeaways that should have Indiana Fever fans genuinely excited about the road ahead. Most notably, the Fever showcased remarkable resilience. Even as the officiating seemed stacked against them, Indiana refused to fold. They clawed back from multiple deficits throughout the night, fighting with grit and unity. When Clark drained back-to-back three-pointers early in the fourth quarter, it wasn't just about scoring. It was a spark that reignited belief across the roster. The message was clear. Not even biased officiating could break their will. The chemistry between Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston is also becoming something special, the kind of intuitive partnership that great teams are built around. In the first half, Clark found Boston for a perfectly timed layup that cut the Dreams' lead to just 2 points. The closest Indiana had been since the opening minutes. It's the kind of play that signals a duo learning to read each other in real time, and becoming dangerous because of it. Perhaps most encouraging of all was Indiana's defensive intensity in crunch time. Clark's 5 steals weren't just an individual stat line highlight. They reflected a team-wide commitment to disrupting Atlanta's offensive rhythm and fighting until the final buzzer.